Check that date, August 8th, 2025 on a Friday. Welcome to Cozy Corner TV. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Kieran Smith, Coleman Hughes, and what's up, y'all? We back on the corner. Happy Friday, everybody. It's a late Friday stream we're having, but I know most of you guys are still up because I know my algorithm. So what's up, guys? Happy Friday. I hope your week has been good to you thus far. I mean, can the week really be good to us? No. That's why most of the time when people ask me how you doing, and I say I'm doing great, because things like that are a choice. They're always like, really, you're doing great? I'm like, yeah, it's a choice. Then they usually tend to think about it and they're like, you know what, I never thought about it like that. I'm like, yeah, don't say, huh? It's a choice. All right, guys, so again, welcome to the daily live stream. Happy Friday, guys. Let's jump into these clips we got. I think I got 4 clips for us, and then ending the live stream with a Christian clip as always. So make sure you guys are good, grounded, regulated, because you know news can be triggering. If you're not good, come back and watch it later. If you are, welcome to the live stream. First up, we got shout out to Club Random Podcast, Bill Maher. Bill Maher calls out the left's refusal to engage, hence the thumbnail. So I thought this was a really good point. He had a guest on. I don't want to spoil it. We're gonna let Bill show us his conversation and what they were talking about. But he basically explained to the guest why Zoran Mamdani being the mayor of New York City is going to be so detrimental. One, to the left, and two, what it's going to usher in as far as the next election is concerned. So we'll take a look at that. Switch gears and we'll go to Fox 35 Orlando. Shout out to them. Trump administration restricts junk food purchase through SNAP. I thought this title was hilarious. So we have to watch this. And I was like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it, because I grew up on things like this. I grew up watching people handle SNAP, food stamps, EBT, whatever you want to call it, right? I grew up watching people handle this stuff. So I thought it was very interesting when I started seeing these restrictions. I've heard some people talk to me about them, some family members, some friends in passing, just about some of the things that they were no longer able to get just a couple months ago. And now, because this is just as of a couple days ago, so maybe 3 days ago, it seems like it's getting tougher and tougher. Now, this is then down in Orlando, and it is state by state. It looks to be very different per the state. But what seems to be pretty congruent, regardless of the state, so throughout all of them, is the sugary foods. It seems like they're getting rid of that. They're axing that. Ben Boy, shout out to you. What you doing in this live? Ben, we reacting to news over here. Daily News. What's up? Shout out to you. Thanks for stopping by in the live stream. Then we'll switch gears and we'll go over to Coleman Hughes. My thoughts on what's happening in Gaza. So Coleman Hughes is going to give us some thoughts of his, about his perspective of what he sees and what he feels like is going on in Gaza. Then we'll switch gears and we'll go over to CNN. So as Fort Stewart shooting, suspect had disagreement with one victim earlier. So I like to react to military things that go on in the news. Those of you guys that know I'm a vet, I like to stay up on my military news. And because this is the Army and 5 soldiers were wounded, they are in stable condition, I just wanted us to take a look at the backstory. Then we will switch gears to end the live stream with James Tellerico, the gentleman I like to call pastor politician, rising Democrat out of Texas. Seems to be very popular nowadays, and he's on my radar. So I reacted to a sermon. Well, we watched the sermon yesterday night that he did about Christian nationalism. And I talked about how some of his point of views were problematic, but that's normal, right? We're not going to agree with everyone on everything. So tonight, we're going to look at a sermon he delivered. I think he delivered the sermon about a year ago, was it? Yes. And it is called The Separation of Church and State. I'm extremely intrigued to see how he's going to cover this, because I've heard him talk about the separation of church and state a little bit. So I'm really excited to see just where he's going to come from as far as this angle is concerned. Even though I have an idea about where he might go, I'm still going to try to remain neutral. All right, guys, with that being said, let's jump into the first clip of the live stream. Let me put this down a little bit, because I know it's going to be loud. It's always loud. We got, first up, Club Random Podcast, Mr. Bill Maher. Bill Maher calls out the left's refusal to engage. Let's take a listen.
Look, Iran, I'm sorry, has been asking for it for the longest time. They have been sponsoring every bad news group in the Middle East who is anti-Western civilization, places where you couldn't survive a day.
Yeah.
So please don't defend them.
No, I mean, look,
No, I'm not saying you would, but
like, I'm not defending
no.
Iran. Like, I swear, like, what the hell did I say?
You and your
What did I say?
Queers for Palestine t-shirt.
Yeah.
Get rid of that.
Like, look, what I hope happens in Iran is I think what everybody across the political spectrum hopes happens in Iran, which is that there's some. I hope that folks in that country rise up, and there's some, It can't happen at the hands of the U.S. I hope that they rise up and we see something, circa pre-revolution.
Here's the key thing about that. Rising up is so much harder than it ever used to be because of technology.
Yeah.
When we rose up against the British, they didn't have drones.
Yeah.
They didn't have cameras. You could hide. I mean, this, even up into the Soviet era, this was the case. Now, for you to rise up and somehow evade the authorities who are looking to catch dissidents, almost impossible.
Yeah. I mean, it happened to, well, I don't really know any recent examples to point to where it happened, proving your point.
Well, the original revolution, not the original, but the Khomeini revolution,
Yeah.
they called that, you know what they call the cassette revolution.
Yeah.
They
Well, like six technologies past that.
They
now.
smuggled in the dissidents' point of view on cassettes, and they played them on their fucking boom boxes.
Yeah.
That's how, and that was only 1978. That's where the technology was.
The irony is that, like, now if you want that type of information to make it feel like you have, like you're part of a community and that you have more people there to rise up with you, the hard part is that, yeah, it's easier to get that information, but it's that much harder for the reasons that you just mentioned to actually effectuate it.
I mean, I don't know what's going to happen I saw BB was with Trump the other day, and they were talking about transforming the whole Middle East. And again, I know Trump, look, I put up my 56
I was reading that.
You know, I got him to sign that. This is my favorite possession.
Yeah.
56 horrible things he said about me, obviously, which were in, obviously I said something about him that someone,
I remember
no one needs to lecture me about
he had Trump
Donald
sign
Trump. But, and well before I did the horrible dinner, which changed the world completely.
I'm curious about the dinner. Do you regret any part of it? Do you regret doing it? Do you regret the
Why would I?
before or after? I'm just curious, like, the way that all of it played out. How do you think about it? Do you think about it?
The people who hated me from before the dinner, the 10% who live on blue sky, just found another thing to hate me for. But their hatred looks ever stupider as time goes by, because their big fear was that, oh my God, I was going to be seduced. And of course, I went right back to tearing him a new asshole every week. If you don't watch my show, that's fine. You don't have to. I don't hate anybody or dislike anybody who doesn't watch it. But then you can't comment, because if you have been watching it, you see that I didn't change one bit. So there was no argument there except your emotions. Except, he went to see the bad man. Like, yes, I'm thrilled. First of all, you're invited to the White House for a private dinner with the president. Really? You don't go? Well, then you're a fucking idiot, in my view, about who the president is. Two, he has all the power. So, like, maybe you should talk to him. And then, part two, like, okay, I had to make a report.
Sorry, guys, we know Bill Maher has colorful
Should I
language.
No, that was not an option. It never has been for me. That's my bond with my audience. So I told him the truth.
But can we really say that he has no point? I'm just saying, like, even if you don't like the president of the United States, you get invited to the White House. You know what I mean? I mean, we know Bill's colorful, but I just think he makes a good point there, because a lot of people were really upset about this. I remember this dinner, and they were mad that he even was considering going to the White House. He actually ended up going and having the dinner and said it was actually very pleasant. I believe Kid Rock was one of the people that was there with them as well. And he said it was very pleasant. And I remember that picture he has, he talked about how it was everything bad that Trump has ever said about him. He printed it out, and he had President Trump sign it, and he signed it. But a lot of people were criticizing him for going to the White House, and I remember him talking about it on the show, and he's just like, really? So So I'm a bad guy now because I want to go to the White House because the president invited me. So that's why he's using the language he's using, because he's like, he just thinks it's idiotic to do that. He's like, if the president invites you to the White House, you're a citizen of the United States, you go to the White House. So that's Bill's opinion on it.
First of all, you're invited to the White House for a private dinner with the president. Really? You don't go? Well, then you're a fucking idiot, in my view, no matter who the president is. So he has all the power. So, like, maybe you should talk to him. And then, part two, like, okay, I had to make a report on it once people knew I went. Should I lie? No. That was not an option. It never has been for me. That's my bond with my audience. So I told him the truth that, yeah, that guy who lives there is different than the one you see on TV. And I kept saying over and over in the piece, like, I'm just reporting. You make your decisions. You do what you do. I'm just saying I went down into the mine, and I'm telling you what's down there that you don't know. Or maybe you do, but like, to just be like, oh no, how it's just emotional.
No, look, if I had the opportunity, if I had the opportunity to talk to Trump, I'd be happy. I try to interview Republican officials, and the farthest right Republican that I've ever gotten on was like Adam Kinzinger, to give you an idea. And you don't really have to in this media environment because it's so bifurcated, and so you have all of these right-wing outlets. You've spoken to, people have come here and you've spoken to them. There's no need for people on opposite ends of the political spectrum to go on opposing viewpoint shows anymore, because there's so many, like, why deal with tough questions when you can just get pats on the head?
But that's what my show is every week.
Right.
My real tough show is like,
But there's in this new media environment, there's
Right.
very few shows that do that. I mean, I reach out to Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Their offices
They all
will never
came here.
respond. Yeah, well,
you gotta reach out again. You know what? I'll call them all for you if you want.
I-
I will
I-
tell them to go on your show,
I'd
and
be
they
happy
will
to
do
have
it.
them.
Because that's one thing that is very different from the left and the right. That surprises me, because usually the right wingers will go anywhere. I just had that guy on. I loved him, Wesley Hunt, Congressman, African American congressman from Texas,
Texas, yeah.
Trump's biggest supporter.
Yeah.
But it's so sincere.
well, that's a
With Paul Begala. Okay, that's America. And by the way, loved it that they bonded. That's what we got to do.
I mean, look, I do debates. Fox LA anchor Alex Michelson,
Good.
who I think
Yeah, I
you
love
know,
him.
he hosts debates between me and Tommy Lahren. I think we've been on like 5 times together
Oh
already.
Jesus, that's like Muhammad Ali fighting a 7-year-old blind girl. Why don't you fight
my
somebody
gosh.
your own size? Tommy, I mean Jesus.
I was on
Oh.
with on Piers Morgan's show today, actually, and
good
we went
for
on
you.
with Ted Cruz's co-host
Good.
Ben Ferguson. So look, anytime I have the opportunity
Good.
to talk to folks on the other side,
Good.
but I can also see at the same time why people on the other side of the aisle would say, like, why engage in this when it can just be easier and not, And in this digital media environment, you really don't have
First
to.
of all, they should be giving me a fucking medal. All this talk about how Trump's only surrounded by ass kissers. Okay, but then when you have someone who is decidedly not MAGA go there and speak to his face things he may never hear. I mean, I said things there they should be carrying me off on their shoulders for saying to him in private, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, he did. I reported it. He didn't object to it, and he didn't object at the time.
Well, so
Things like, why are you scaring people? You're scaring people. Why do you want to do that to your citizens? What you did with Obama's birth certificate was low. 2020 election, you didn't win that. I mean, I'm not saying this is going to change the world. I'm saying, like, your shot doing nothing, not engaging,
Not
has
saying
zero
anything.
chance.
Yeah.
Mine, this guy, I'm telling you, I know this cat a lot better than I did before. He's a people person. He talks to people. You have to keep the lines open. The stupidest thing the left does, and this dinner is a perfect example of it, is having this attitude toward the right that we won't even break bread with you. We are so far above you that we won't even sit down at the same table.
No, I mean, look,
that is their attitude, and that makes me sick too.
It's-
I'm glad
Yeah, that's
I
a
break
crazy
bread,
attitude.
and that's what makes them hate the left so much. They think that they're deplorables. We're deplorables, and you won't even sit down to dinner with us. Well, good luck. See how far that gets you.
Well, I mean, right now, look, we're in a position where Democrats lost the popular vote, they lost the electoral vote, and so we no longer have the luxury of excommunicating people from the party
Exactly.
who are problematic, and so,
You really don't.
that, I think
We're
that's
not talking
look,
to the other party
well, the
who
hard
has all
part
the
is
power.
anybody who has any semblance of an ego, myself included, wants to see, like, you see Trump engage in all this bullshit, the Epstein thing, for example, whatever it may be, the pro-peace, and then he bombs Iran, says he's going to release the Epstein files, doesn't do it, and you have folks on the left who say, who want to be like, you fucking idiot, I told you so. Like, how did you not see this was going to come, that this was going to happen? How did you not see that when he said he's going to lower costs for people, that he doesn't give a shit about people? He's promised cheaper healthcare before he never delivered it, promised infrastructure before he never delivered it, promised the jobs being a manufacturing renaissance. This guy always plays the same populist shtick and he never delivers. And so how do you not get it? But I think the way that I have to check myself often now, because the goal is persuasion, right? Like if you work in politics, the only way you win, the only way you exercise power is if you actually get in office so that you can enact your agenda. That's it. Otherwise, you're just chirping at people on Twitter. And like, while that may be fun, not that fun if you're watching the other side enact their agenda and you have ICE agents on the street.
You're
So I
right.
had to check myself often.
You are looking to sell your house. This is the one mistake.
Right, if you know that, you do have to check yourself
Multiple
often.
agents. A lot of people.
I'm glad he points that out because that's one thing that we
friendly
don't
with our
see.
governor, who
Let's hold this. That's one thing you don't see. This clip right here, I want to go to the next one because it really is them just continuing the conversation. And it's Bill Maher and Brian Tyler Cohen, the real reason Democrats keep losing. So this is not a long clip, but it kind of is in conjunction with what we were just listening to. But here's the thing. I think Bill Maher made a great point because I remember him talking about this so much, and he's just like, the one reason why the Democrats keep losing is because they don't even want to break bread. They literally don't even want to break bread with the other side. And really what it looks like is, just a bunch of Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. And there's no sitting down having a normal conversation. And Bill Maher is like, listen, as long as we keep continuing in this way, you might see in this clip, you might not. But there is a clip where he's talking and he's like, this is the type of stuff that voting for Zoran Mamdani and the things that we're seeing now, this is the reason why the Democrats keep losing. And this is what is going to usher in a J.D. Vance presidency. Like, he literally has already gone on record to say that. So let's just take a look at this next clip.
who I also get on his case and have for being far too left. And
Now he's talking about Gavin Newsom because Bill Maher's out in California.
I'm friendly with our governor, who I also get on his case and have for being far too left. And it's becoming like we're friends, so it's kind of a kidding thing, but like I will talk to him about the first thing when I see him. I won't even say his name, I'll just start on the potholes, or I couldn't get my solar hooked up, or all the crazy of California that he has to wear as baggage. I mean, it's a state where it's hard to buck that, but yeah, I think you could, and he's starting to. He has moved to the right, or let's say the center, on three big issues that I could name. I won't bore the crowd, or maybe we will. But, and this is what I've been hoping he could do. It's a lot of baggage, but I always thought this guy has what it takes to be a presidential winner because he's just really smart. He's a great fighter, like he's mean, which is great. He knows how to be mean where you should. And he looks great. That doesn't hurt to be the tall, good-looking guy in the race. The Democrats, I think, have maybe learned their lesson and gone through their phase where they couldn't stand the sight of a white heterosexual man. And maybe they're over that now as well.
I
Maybe
wonder
they are.
if
Let's see.
there will be electoral. Like Democrats love to worry about electability, so we'll often get meta with it and say like, okay, I want X person, but I have to choose Y.
That's kind of crazy, right? Because it's almost like, okay, Bill, I'm gonna run that back. It's like, what are you trying to say about Joe Biden? But maybe they have gotten over it because I can remember pre-election, one of the running things that people were saying about Democrats is that you guys hate men, like the Democrats hate men, and I remember a lot of people saying things like that.
Fighter, like he's mean, which is great. He knows how to be mean where you should.
Yeah, he bugs back. He
And
does.
he looks great. That doesn't hurt to be the tall, good-looking guy in the race.
Yeah.
The Democrats, I think, have maybe learned their lesson and gone through their phase where they couldn't stand the sight of a white heterosexual man. And maybe they're over that now as well.
I wonder if there will be electoral, like Democrats love to worry about electability. So we'll often get meta with it and say like, okay, I want X person, but I have to choose Y person because I don't think X person can win, instead of just choosing
Right.
X person because you want them, because
Right.
because you like them. But I think to that point, because I don't think that we've shed our interminable fear of not winning elections and focusing on electability, I do think that after Hillary, after Kamala, I don't know that Democrats are going to be able to stomach putting forward a woman as the nominee just because of those two reasons. I think that there's a world in which Democrats are going to say two of the last three nominees were women. Both of those women lost. The man won, and so for fear of losing again to whoever, whether it's some iteration of the Steve Bannon, let's put Trump in for a third term, or J.D. Vance or whoever it is, I think there will be a reversion if I had to guess. But then again, I told you I can't predict
couldn't
it.
agree more. I would, again, and I have made a lot of predictions, and all of them were right except Kamala. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of did that as wishful thinking. But this is where it circles back to the Seth Rogen show. Because them casting the president and vice president slot is exactly that episode.
Yeah.
They're going to start out.
Totally.
They're going to go, okay, we can't have a woman
Yeah.
because we just had two and they lost. But we can't have a white man. Or we have to have some non-white
I
man
think-
presence on the ticket.
I
So it's going
think
to
that's
be
what I was
okay.
just
So
gonna
it's
say.
going to be, say it's Gavin, and then it's going to be like, okay, and then Pete Buttigieg because he's also gay. Okay, but then what are you saying, that gays can only get the second? And they're going to do the exact episode.
Probably. I mean, that's
I know.
I mean, look, the reality of the situation
They're
is that
insane. That's
Democrats are
why.
the Big Ten party, and there are a lot of coalitions that are represented. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to be a Republican. You're just a bunch of old Christian white guys, And so,
Well, I would hardly call Trump a Christian.
well, I mean, but that's who he panders to. He's certainly not pandering to the atheists out there.
No.
So, I mean, that's their problem to deal with. The fact that they have that they have accepted as their deity a guy who, I mean, not exactly embracing the ideals of Christianity on a daily
racial
basis.
Question to me is like a perfect example of how people want something in the middle. I'm hoping to give them that. And on either side, they're ridiculous. I mean, the Republicans are definitely too white male, and the Democrats are definitely too, we got to check the box first. And America just wants something where we just, okay, we acknowledge our terrible racial past.
Yeah.
I think most Americans think it's apropos to not just acknowledge it, but make certain remedial steps. But it's a different world than it was back in, when we were as bad as Iran. And it's also not correct to completely throw merit over the side of the ship.
Well, I actually think that the defining factor in this upcoming election, again, to predict something that I have no idea if it's going to pan out or not, is not going to be political ideology. It's actually just going to be a willingness to fight. And I think that far and away is going to be the number one thing. Democrats for so long have felt like the party of strongly worded letters. And for somebody like me who has grown up in the Trump era, like I've come of age in the Trump era, and I've watched as these motherfuckers don't care about anything. Like we're out here saying like process, norms, institutions, and they're like, we don't give a fuck about any of those things. Democrats are like, oh, the parliamentarian says no. Republicans are like, fire the fucking parliamentarian. And this has been my whole life in politics, watching this play out.
It's true.
Where Democrats will play by the rules in hope of some elusive reciprocation that never arrives. And we'll say, okay, we'll Mitch McConnell says he's going to put forward these new rules about the Supreme Court. Democrats get fucked. the parliamentarian says we can't include something, Democrats get fucked. Like every single instance is Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown.
They have no shame.
And they have no shame.
You have to start with that. When Mitch McConnell did that and said, well, we've always done it where when a guy dies on the Supreme Court, whoever's president gets to pick. I know it's sort of weird because, like, 5 guys could die during one guy's term and no guys could die during another guy's term, so it's kind of a fuck system to begin with, but that's our system and we've always done it. And he just went, no,
Yeah,
not with this guy. I mean,
we're gonna change that.
Like the law became make me.
Yeah.
So Trump did not exactly invent that. Mitch McConnell kind of invented that.
Correct.
And Trump ran with it. It was perfect.
It was a symptom of the larger disease, but
Yeah,
the disease was
right.
there. But I think that, going back to that point, whether you are willing to come in there and actually fight back, and look, you can fight for virtuous things. Like, you can fight for expanded access to healthcare, you can fight for women's reproductive rights, climate change, stricter gun laws, whatever it may be on the left. But, like, the key word is that you're actually willing to fight. And we just don't, I mean, Democrats are older, they are of a different generation, they don't have leadership that is going, for whom fighting and winning is going to be their MO, is going to be their North Star, and they need it.
But you also have to fight against your own party's or own faction's fringe.
I feel
And
like
this is
it will I think a big part of the reason that so many warring factions on the left are so unsettled right now is because we're not in power anywhere. And so now comes the point where everybody wants to come out of the woodwork and say, it's because of this. It's because you didn't do all of this like me, like my positions, and because you didn't put forward these positions that I espouse. So there is no winning formula, and so as a result of that, everybody thinks their formula is the winning formula. And I think that once we win, all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, you're right, that's how you did it. Oh, Barack Obama won by doing X, Y, Z, that's how to win.
Yeah.
And it quells some of that turmoil that I think is brewing right now.
I don't disagree with that at all.
Oh, man.
Amber, you're incredibly creative. Here's the thing, life is all...
Remember I had dinner with Hitler according to Larry David? I mean, come on, man. Once you play the Hitler card, you're lost. But okay. So what I can say to Republicans, and have said to them, is, you know what? I told the truth. I didn't shrink from that, and I took the heat from the left. Now I want you to do the same thing. You do it. You take the heat from the right because I want you to be honest. Do you really think it's cool to talk about running for a third term? Because I know you don't. And I have standing to say that to them because I already got my beating from the left about me telling the truth.
Yeah.
That's a really important weapon to have in your pocket.
If
I would say so. And it's also something that's not common amongst people, right? Unfortunately, telling the truth. So yeah, I would say it is a really powerful thing. I thought it was a great conversation. You guys head over to Bill Maher's channel and take a look at that full conversation. I want you guys to give him his due views. I can literally play the whole thing, but we're not going to do that. So let's switch gears and go over to Fox 35 Orlando. Shout out to them. Trump administration restricts junk food purchases through SNAP. All right, they're coming for you. They're coming. Here we go.
New at 6, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wants junk food stripped from SNAP.
Yeah, this is part of President Trump's plan to make America healthy again. Nearly a dozen states have agreed to the limits. Fox 35's Mike Emanuel has more.
The National Mall was turned into a bustling farmers market Monday, part of the Trump administration's effort to make America healthy again.
We lined up some regulations that allow way more local food to be eaten.
And the administration is going further, approving more waivers allowing states to ban certain junk foods from the list paid for by the SNAP program, formerly known as food stamps.
Today, I'm proud to sign 6 more waivers for Florida, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and Colorado.
The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, served more than 41 million people and cost $100 billion in 2024. Before the waivers, the funds could not be used to buy products such as alcohol, tobacco, or prepared foods. In May, Nebraska became the first state to get approval to also restrict soda and energy drinks. Proponents of the waivers, including Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., say they will incentivize Americans to eat healthier.
If you want to buy a sugary soda, you want to be able to do that. But the U.S. taxpayer should not pay for it.
But industry groups like the National Grocers Association raised concerns the waivers could cause confusion among consumers, saying it's up to the government, quote, to determine whether their goals are being met without negatively affecting access to nutritious food. This year, SNAP has served a monthly average of 42 million Americans with about $188 in benefits per person. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
Okay, so how do we feel about that?
Pastor Doug Wilson.
How do we feel about that? Because I got so many people that have been so upset about this, so angry about this, and they're just like, oh my goodness, we knew RFK was gonna do this and make our life hard, and it's like, hey, I'll give it to you, right? When you're in a place of being comfortable, changes like this are never easy. Never easy because you've been spoiled. You know, you've been spoiled. So it's like you're upset and you're mad, and I get it. But to RFK's point, you know, he's been on this health nutrition thing for years, for decades. He's been saying things like this long before he was even a part of President Trump's cabinet. And there are a lot of bad things in sugary foods and in processed foods, like there just really are. Even if we love them, even if we like them. Literally on a list of mortality rates, the United States of America, it's like we're so far low on the list. Like at this point, I think they have us at the highest age of living. I think it's 85. They have us at maybe 88. But out of all of the countries, I think the last time I checked, we were like number 37. I think we dropped down in the 50s actually. Before the last time I checked, we were in the 30s. And it's like, that's crazy. Because why? Because there's places like Okinawa, Japan, where they don't eat M&Ms and Skittles for breakfast. And they live to be 90, 100, 110. And that's like a normal thing. That's not a normal thing in the United States, you know. And RFK is, if I know this stuff, RFK knows this stuff already. I can remember a point in time where I would go to my mom and say things like, Mom, do you know that America has 35 ingredients that they put in their food that in other countries it's illegal to put into foods? I remember saying this over 13 years ago, you know, but again, we like what we like. We like our Cheerios and our Fruity Pebbles and things like that. I don't like that. I'm not a cereal eater. I haven't eaten cereal in years. But we like the things that we like. Nonetheless, RFK says, listen, if you want to buy a sugary soda, you have the right to do that, but the American taxpayer shouldn't pay for it. Well, I mean, as long as they're allowing you to get something to drink, right? So they're definitely not going, no one's going to die of dehydration because obviously they're going to let you get water. But they're restricting a lot of things. Oh my God. Get me, why you open my door? Unless you're gonna come in here and be on this live stream. Don't be distracting me. He's bad. He always does that. So yeah, you know, he says the American taxpayer shouldn't have to pay for it. And there's a lot of people that agree with that. There's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I don't want to pay for your Coca-Cola. I don't want you to get Gatorade on Snap. So it is what it is. At least they're not, I mean, they can't take it, they have to let you get water, right? So I can't say I'm happy about that because they have to let you get water. They can't let you not have water, but you know, it's a lot of people, I mean, I might play it on a live stream tomorrow during the first one earlier in the day because I can show you some videos where people are straight just crashing out over this SNAP EBT thing that's happening, right? I can't say rightfully so because they're not, it's not like they're saying you just can't have it. But they are restricting a lot of things. And I mean, you know, Red Bull and Gatorade and all of that crap. It's not good for you anyway. All right, guys. So let's switch gears. We're going to go over to Coleman Hughes now. Coleman cover. My thoughts on what's happening in Gaza. Coleman Hughes. All right. So this is just a 17-minute clip. I had a longer one, but I want you guys to go to Coleman's channel and give him his dual views, conversations with Coleman. Great podcast. So let's take a listen to this clip about Coleman's thoughts on what's happening in Gaza.
Well, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Coleman. Today I'd like to share a few thoughts about what's happening in Gaza. This is a difficult topic and there's no way to say anything meaningful about it without offending people, but I think it's important to discuss nonetheless. As I've said on this show and on a few of my Joe Rogan appearances over the past few years, I believe that in the war between Israel and Hamas, the Israelis are the good guys and Hamas are the bad guys. That may seem like a cartoonish way to describe the situation, or it might seem like an obscene opinion given the images of emaciated children that you've probably seen over the past few weeks, but it's still the truth. And it's a truth that's incredibly easy to lose sight of amid the day-to-day coverage of this war. In my view, the deepest tragedy in the war right now is that both sides have committed war crimes, and in both cases, those war crimes are falling on Palestinian civilians. The truth, of course, is that every war features war crimes, but usually each army commits those crimes against the enemy's population. In this case, the Palestinians of Gaza have received a double dose of the excesses of each side. But here's the crucial point. That doesn't make both sides morally equal. Let me begin by making something clear. When I say that the Israelis are the good guys in this war, I'm not saying that everything the IDF does is justifiable, far from it. And I'm not saying that Israeli soldiers haven't committed war crimes. Certainly they have. What I mean is that Israel's goals as a country are far more benign and ethical than Hamas's goals. Israel's goal is to live in peace with its neighbors. Now you can focus on the far-right faction within Israel that wants more than that, but it's just that. It's one faction within a democracy, no more representative of the will of Israelis than AOC or Marjorie Taylor Greene represents the will of Americans. By and large, Israelis don't want to conquer Gaza. In fact, they left Gaza voluntarily in 2005, and they don't want to wipe Gaza off the map. If they wanted that, they could have done it any time in the last several decades. With their advantage in firepower, they could do it now in a matter of weeks. And you should ask yourself why they don't. Hamas, on the other hand, does want to conquer Israel and wipe it off the map. And they would be happy to do what they did on October 7th to the entire country. That's what I mean when I say that the two sides in this war are not the same. There's a huge moral asymmetry between them, and that matters. The point I'm making here is right on the surface of how we look at most wars in history. It's possible to agree with the goals of an army, but condemn its methods.
Yep.
In fact, it's not just possible, it's actually most people's default view of most wars, including just wars. Many people take that attitude towards dropping atomic bombs on Japan, for instance.
Yep.
Or when you learn about the Union Army burning down 40% of Atlanta, including civilian homes during the Civil War, most of us respond by thinking, wow, that was terrible, and some of it must have been unnecessary, but the North was still the good guy in that war. Why were they the good guys? Not because they were the underdogs, in fact, they weren't. Not because they suffered more war crimes, in fact, the South almost certainly suffered more war crimes.
For sure.
But because their goals were more benign. The South was fighting to preserve slavery,
Less harmful.
and the North was fighting to end it. If not at the beginning of the war, then certainly by the end. In other words, the goals that each side is fighting for matter a great deal. That's not to say that goals are the only things that matter. How armies conduct themselves matters too. And it's very easy to find examples of IDF soldiers conducting themselves terribly. Each example of this should be reported on and exposed, and those responsible held to account. However, it's also true that this is to be expected in any war. If 1% of all human beings are sociopaths, and just humor me with that assumption for a moment, if 1% of all people are sociopaths, then out of 500,000 or so Israeli soldiers that have served in Gaza, you'd expect 5,000 of them to be maniacs. And that would be true in any war.
Yeah.
How much damage could 5,000 heartless soldiers do over the course of a year and a half? How many war crimes could they commit against innocent Palestinians? And how much bad PR could they generate for Israel? Yet that's what we expect to see, even if the IDF were doing everything right. But is the IDF doing everything right? Absolutely not. For one thing, the choice to cut off all humanitarian aid to Gaza for over 2 months earlier this year in order to pressure Hamas to release the hostages was, in my view, a mistake and arguably a war crime. Hamas has stolen enough aid to survive in its tunnels for a prolonged period, we know that, and they're completely unaffected by the suffering of their own people, we know that too. You can add to this the failed experiment in aid distribution that's been going on since May. IDF soldiers using live rounds for crowd control, which is to say, shooting above people's heads to disperse crowds. But there are also credible reports of soldiers shooting civilians who are trying to get food and accidentally go into a prohibited zone. Now, some of these are tragic accidents, and some are doubtless war crimes. But again, it's worth lingering over the asymmetry of war crimes even here. When an IDF soldier goes berserk, he commits a war crime. But every time a Hamas fighter shoots a bullet without wearing a uniform, it's a war crime. Hamas's entire MO is one big war crime. And unlike most wars, where each side is committing crimes against enemy civilians, in this case, almost all of the excesses, both of the IDF and of Hamas, fall on Palestinian civilians. But whose fault is that? Is it Israel's fault that its own civilians are incredibly well protected by defensive infrastructure like the Iron Dome and bomb shelters? Is it Israel's fault that Hamas has built one of the most extensive networks of underground bomb shelters in the history of warfare, but doesn't allow its own civilians to enter them? Is it Israel's fault that Hamas uses children as lookouts, thereby turning them into combatants under the international laws of war? Because when we hold Israel alone responsible for the civilian death toll in Gaza, a death toll that results directly from Hamas's barbaric style of warfare, we are implicitly holding Israel responsible for Hamas's war crimes against the Palestinians. Now, it's incredibly easy to lose sight of this, given the mainstream media bias on the topic. For instance, the New York Times released a story on July 24th entitled, "Gazans Are Dying of Starvation." The article relied on testimony from several doctors working in Gaza, as well as the Gaza Health Ministry. And it used that to build a case that deaths from starvation are on the rise. In the article, there was one photo that stood out. It was a photo of a mother holding an emaciated skeletal infant named Mohammed Zakaria al-Mutawat. His photo was displayed prominently on the front page of the physical edition of the New York Times and made the rounds on social media. You almost certainly saw it. And importantly, it was the only photo in the article that clearly suggested starvation as opposed to chaotic, hungry refugees.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't long before sleuths on X discovered that there was another photo, which the Times chose to omit, of the boy and his mother next to his 3-year-old brother, who clearly isn't starving. So if there's no food, why is the 3-year-old not also thin? It turns out this young boy didn't look emaciated because of starvation conditions. In fact, he was born with serious disease. Perhaps cerebral palsy or hypoxia, it's not yet clear. But 6 days after the article came out, the New York Times had to issue a correction, noting that the boy was born with unrelated health issues that account for his skeletal appearance. Now, if such crucial information could be left out of the original article, what other information was left out?
That's a good point, Coleman.
Now, let me be clear here. I'm not saying there isn't hunger or food insecurity or humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Of course there is. What I'm saying is that the pipeline that's feeding you information about the humanitarian disaster in Gaza is fundamentally broken, biased, untrustworthy, and weaponized against Israel. Now think about what had to happen for the New York Times to publish that photo on its front page without the information that this particular child was born with serious disease. Journalists had to talk to the child's mother and doctor, who presumably withheld this crucial detail, and the claims had to survive fact-checking without anyone at the Times pointing out how strange it was to see one child emaciated and his brother right next to him looking fine.
Yeah.
And then after the Twitter sleuths got to the story, They had to call this doctor again and ask him, hey, did you by chance leave out the fact that this particular baby looks the way he does because he has a disease unrelated to this war? And then you have to wonder, because the entire story is based on the testimony of similarly placed doctors, how many of the doctors in Gaza, who are generally not neutral about the two sides in this war, how many of those doctors who talk to Western journalists are making similar omissions? And if they are, how do we even know? As for the Gaza Health Ministry, which is a part of Hamas's political infrastructure, it's very difficult to trust their reports as well. I mean, on one level, they're the only real source of information about what's happening in Gaza, so you can't just discount them blindly. But nor can you trust them blindly. Recall that when there was an explosion at a hospital early on in the war, the same Gaza Health Ministry reported within minutes that exactly 471 people had been killed by an Israeli bomb that hit the hospital. And the New York Times reported this uncritically. Well, it turns out the true death count was less than half that number. The hospital itself wasn't even hit. It was the parking lot next to the hospital. And oh yeah, it wasn't an Israeli bomb. It was actually a Palestinian Jihad rocket. So one has to be skeptical about how the Gaza Health Ministry arrives at its confident conclusions. And one has to understand that their incentive is to exaggerate as much as they can get away with. And the less skeptical that we are as Western journalists, the more they can exaggerate without penalty. Again, the information pipeline here is just fundamentally broken. Finally, I want to discuss the charge of genocide, because this is one of the most serious charges made against Israel. It's also, in my view, one of the most absurd. Genocide is the physical destruction, not the metaphorical destruction, not the destruction of property, but the physical destruction of a people in whole or in part. Israel's aim in Gaza is not to destroy the Palestinian people as a whole, nor to destroy Gazan Palestinians in particular. How do we know this? Because even if we accept the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers at face value, that is 60,000 people killed in Gaza in about 22 months of war. That is 3% of Gaza's population. You could argue that it's more than 60,000 dead because there are uncounted bodies tragically trapped under the rubble. But on the other hand, you'd have to subtract the combatants from that number as well, and the IDF says that about 20,000 combatants have been killed. To be clear, my default assumption is that both sides in any war are exaggerating their numbers. But for the sake of argument and fairness, let's just take both sides at their word for a moment. So 60,000 dead, 20,000 of whom are combatants. That's about 3% of Gaza's pre-war population killed in 22 months of war. Now, critics of Israel are fond of pointing out just how big the power disparity between Israel and the Palestinians is. And they are completely correct. Israel can do just about anything it wants. If the IDF chose to destroy Gazans as a people, they could kill almost everyone in Gaza in a matter of weeks. So ask yourself, why haven't they? And if your answer is international pressure, meaning they really would like to commit a genocide, except they don't want to become a pariah state like North Korea, well then you've already conceded that they're not, in fact, committing a genocide. What you're accusing them of in that case is harboring secret wishes that they're not acting on. So we can have that conversation, but that's separate from an accusation of genocide. The Nazis killed 60% of European Jews. The Turks killed over 50% of Armenians. In Rwanda, something like 80% of Tutsis were killed in 100 days. Those were genocides. And in legitimate cases of genocide, in which a smaller percentage of people were killed, it was because the genocidaire didn't have the ability to kill more. Now, we know that Israel could easily kill 50% or 60 or 80% of Gazans in less than 100 days, if they wanted to, but they don't. And that's really all you need to know to be sure that Israel isn't committing genocide. The focus on what an Israeli defense minister said in his angriest moment after October 7th, or some truly awful comments made about Palestinians by a far-right minister, this focus is understandable, but it's actually misplaced. The reason we focus on what politicians say is to divine their intentions from unclear information, right? We're trying to understand what they would do if they had the power to do it. But in the case of Israel and Gaza, we don't have to divine their intentions because they're so powerful, they can already do whatever they want. Now that said, if you do want to get into the weeds about what Israeli decision makers have actually said, as opposed to what propagandists claim that they've said, then you should read the Atlantic article by Yair Rosenberg called
What did
top Israeli war officials really say about Gaza? For instance, one of the most frequently circulated quotes, including in the New York Times, the BBC, the NPR, and the Guardian, was literally fabricated. It was a fake quote. And many others were deliberately taken out of context. So check out that article if you want more. But again, all of this is a little bit beside the point because the IDF is so powerful that the best indication of what Israeli decision makers are trying to do in Gaza isn't a cherry-picked quote by a minister. The best indication is what they're actually doing. And what they're actually doing is trying to destroy Hamas, an organization that started a war against them and is fanatically committed to their destruction. So there's more I could talk about, but in the interest of brevity, I'll leave it here. Whether or not you agree with everything I've said, hopefully you find something I've said useful. See you next time on Conversations with Coleman.
Hey, shout out to Coleman Hughes. Great topic. You know, a lot of this I agree with on Coleman Hughes, and I'm not going to get into everything, but this whole rhetoric of if you don't only stand with Israel, you know, you're anti-Semitic. I've said plenty of times that I think that's absolutely ridiculous. You can just be someone who just doesn't stand for war. Forget the fact that there could be a time for war. You can just be a person that you particularly don't like, you don't care for, and you're like, I don't want to see any side die. But what I find so interesting about mainstream media is that they do an absolute great job at leaving out how much Hamas is participating in all of this. It's just so convenient the way that they're able to do that and just make it seem like, oh yeah, you know, like this is what's happening in Gaza and this is what Israel is doing to Gaza. And they're not ever pointing out the fact that Israel is trying to destroy Hamas, that they're trying to get rid of Hamas because this is a terrorist group, right? They don't understand that the Gazans are being killed and used by people from Hamas. At least they don't report it that way. And on that aspect, I can say I agree with Coleman a lot. I can agree with a lot of things that he said. You know, Israel committing genocide, and I'm like, seriously? If a country wants to commit genocide, it's not a hard thing to do if they have the ability to do it. That's why Coleman said it's easy for Israel to wipe out 80% of Gazans if they really wanted to. So the question is, why haven't they? Because that's not the objective. They're not trying to wipe out 80% Gazans. They're trying to get at Hamas, who is using those people and who are killing those people and who are committing all these different war crimes. And for some reason, people can't see that, but maybe that's because mainstream media tends to lie about it a lot. All right, guys. So with that being said, I'm going to switch gears. We're going to actually jump to James Tellerico. I'm going to save the army soldier and the 5 wounded soldiers for tomorrow's earlier live stream. But I want to get to James Tellerico's sermon because as him being a rising star within the Democratic Party, he is state right now. People have talked about him going Senate. He is the gentleman that Joe Rogan has said, you should run for president. And I get it, you know, he's very winsome, you know what I'm saying? The way that he comes off, the way he articulates himself, he articulates himself well. He comes off very meek and mild-mannered, and I think those are things that are winning people over. And let's not forget he talks about Jesus, so that helps, you know, as far as popularity. I'm not going to say the guy is not safe. I'm not going to say that about James, you know. Do I think that he says some problematic things in his sermon? Of course. You know, I'm not going to agree with everyone on everything, and that's just not going to happen, and the same vice versa. But when I say problematic, I say things that I'm like, okay, this is pretty problematic. This is like basic Christianity 101. That if someone else hears this, at least they should be disagreeing with this. So let's take a look at how he did. Yesterday we watched some of his sermon on Christian nationalism. Today it says James Tellerico delivers sermon on the separation of church and state. I'm excited to see where he goes with this. Even though I have a hunch where you might go with this, James. But surprise me, James. Surprise us.
Well, it's the Sunday before the 4th of July. So I thought we'd talk about two things we're not supposed to talk about in polite company: religion and politics. I'm a Christian. I'm also a legislator. This church taught me at an early age that Jesus only gave two commandments: love God and love neighbor. Christianity is both spiritual and political, because politics is just another word for how we treat our neighbors. As a legislator, I passed bills to reduce the cost of prescription drugs, expand access to child care, reform our justice system, and fund our neighborhood schools. Through public policy, I'm trying to make life just a little easier for my neighbors. But loving thy neighbor in the Texas legislature is not easy.
Man, I'm telling you, if you know anything about public speaking, boy, this dude is good. Like, James is good. If you know anything about public speaking, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, oh man, like, things like this, like, they get me going. Like, these little things, body language, like how someone articulates themselves, how they are in front of a crowd, the way that they move, the way they open their conversation, like, all of that stuff catches my attention. And I'm thinking to myself, like, this dude is good. Like, I can see how he can captivate an audience.
When things get hard, I fall back on my faith. During my second term, I enrolled in seminary to follow Jesus' first commandment, to love God. As a seminarian and a lawmaker, I'm just starting to understand how these two commands sustain, challenge, and enrich each other in inner life and in outer life. As I was sitting at this intersection of religion and politics, Christian nationalism reared its ugly head at the state capitol. A bill to force every teacher to display the Ten Commandments. A bill to replace school counselors with untrained chaplains. A bill to defund public schools, to subsidize private Christian schools. Religion and politics are on a collision course in this state and in this country.
They always have.
Now we are all asking the same urgent question: what is the relationship between religion and politics, between church and state? The future of Christianity, the future of democracy, depend on our answers. On my first day in office, I put my hand on a Bible and swore an oath to the Constitution, not the other way around. I'm a Christian, but I know the most dangerous form of government is theocracy. Because the only thing worse than a tyrant is a tyrant who thinks they're on a mission from God. My faith in Jesus leads me to reject Christian nationalism and commit myself to the project of a multiracial, multicultural democracy where we can all freely love God and fully love our neighbors. You know, I put my hand on that Bible because faith is my foundation. My politics grows out of my faith. Jesus is far more radical than any political ideology or political candidate. And when I say radical, I don't mean extreme. The word radical comes from the Latin word for root. Jesus goes to the root of our problems and calls us to deeper love, deeper justice, deeper peace. Jesus should challenge our politics, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, a socialist or a capitalist. a libertarian or a communist. Jesus should challenge our certainties. If our Christianity is not unsettling us, then we're doing it wrong. But too many Christians are putting their politics ahead of their faith. Too many Christians are baptizing their partisanship and calling it Christianity.
Especially during election year.
Faith is not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. I learned that here. Our pastor, Dr. Jim Rigby, told us that our love for God and for neighbor requires a commitment to justice. That commitment led him to criticize President Bush for invading Iraq. It also led him to criticize President Obama for drone strikes and mass deportations. Religion should never be partisan, but religion is, by definition, always political. The Roman Empire didn't crucify Jesus for being a nice guy. Crucifixion was the punishment for rebels. Jesus challenged the political, economic, religious powers that be. He provoked a direct conflict with the ruling class, with the rich and the powerful, with the men who think they're gods. Jesus took on the system. Anytime a government or a corporation or a church is tyrannical and oppressive, it is in conflict with Jesus. But throughout history, too often, Christians have sided with the rulers of this world, sometimes loudly and sometimes with our silence. By staying neutral, by staying non-political, we are siding with the powerful. We are protecting the status quo. Christianity at its best challenged the empire, challenged the feudal system, challenged slavery, challenged Jim Crow. That is what we are called to as Christians, the demolition of domination. And we have to continue that work today. When I was a kid, I remember people walking around with those bracelets with the letters WWJD. What would Jesus do? Well, what would Jesus do about a tax system that benefits the rich over the poor? What would Jesus do about a healthcare system that forces the sick to...
Well, the Bible talks about that, so... What would Jesus do about a tax system that elevates the rich over the poor? James! Come on, James. I said don't do this, James. I said don't do this. But you know what? We're only 6 minutes in, James. So I still got grace for you, James. I still got grace for you. Here's what the Bible would say about a tax system that elevates the rich over the poor. He would say, give to the government what's the government's, and give to God what's God's. That's what the Bible would say about a tax system that does that. But you can continue, James.
What would Jesus do about a tax system that benefits the rich over the poor? What would Jesus do about a healthcare system that forces the sick to start GoFundMe pages to afford life-saving surgeries? What would Jesus do about an education system that ties a child's school funding to their community's property wealth? What would Jesus do about a justice system that incarcerates more people than any other country on the face of the earth? And what would Jesus do about an economic system that values profits over the health of our planet? Would he stay in his room and pray? Or would he walk into the seat of power and flip over the tables of injustice? Jesus calls us to do more than offer charity.
Really, James? James! Here's what, Jesus will not walk into an education building and do that. He's not going to walk into a hospital building and do that. He's not going to walk into an IRS building and do that. He did that in a church because he was doing what? Fulfilling a prophecy, James. Remember? Oh, James, come on. All right, James, we're only 7 minutes in. I'm going to be graceful.
We as Christians are called to challenge the systems that make charity necessary. The separation of church and state should never be understood as the separation of faith and politics. We all bring our moralities and our philosophies to our politics, and faith is no different. My faith shapes my politics. I hope it shapes yours, like it did for Jimmy Carter, Dr. King, Dorothy Day, maybe Doris Day too, and Cesar Chavez. Christian activism is not Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is elevating our religion over others, dominating our neighbors instead of loving them as ourselves. I don't think Jesus would endorse the Democratic or Republican Party platforms. I think Jesus would challenge America to keep working toward a radical vision of democracy. More rights, more freedoms, more opportunities for more of our neighbors. In today's scripture reading, after Jesus teaches his followers to love thy neighbor, a lawyer pipes up and asks him to define neighbor. It's always the lawyers. And Jesus responds with a story about a man who was beaten and left for dead on the side of the road. A priest walks by and does nothing. A religious man walks by and does nothing. Then a Samaritan walks by. Now, for Jesus' listeners, the Samaritans were not just a different religious group. The Samaritans were their sworn enemies. But in Jesus' story, the Samaritan stops, bandages the man's wounds, takes him to an inn, nurses him back to health, and before leaving, pays the innkeeper to look after him. The parable of the Good Samaritan is about so much more than helping people on the side of the road. It is a shocking definition of neighbor. The person who embodies divine love is the other, the outcast, the enemy. That is who Jesus is calling us to love. Theologian Barbara Brown Taylor summed up the meaning of the Good Samaritan when she wrote, "The only clear line I draw these days is this. When my religion tries to come between me and my neighbor, I will choose my neighbor. Jesus never commanded me to love my religion." The separation of church and state in our First Amendment is a profound act of loving thy neighbor. America is not a Christian nation. It is a nation where you are free to be a Christian,
Really?
or a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or a Muslim, or a Jew, or an atheist. America was started by religious minorities fleeing religious persecution. That's the promise of America. A multiracial, multicultural democracy, a melting pot. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. It's a promise that we are still struggling to fulfill today. It's a promise to love our neighbors as ourselves. Not all of our founders were Christians. Some of them weren't even religious. But I think you can hear the radical teachings of Jesus in the words of our Declaration. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Democracy is a Christian value, and Christian nationalism is a threat to democracy. Christian nationalists, those who fund it, those who preach it, those who legislate it, are preying on people's fears in a changing world. They're trying to convince us that our neighbors are to blame for our alienation, that domination can calm our anxieties, that democracy is not the solution, but the problem. They're undermining our elections and stealing our freedoms. They're indoctrinating students and defunding schools. They're banning books and banning abortion. And some of them want to ban IVF, ban contraception, ban women from voting. Some of them want to ban gay marriage and interracial marriage, all in the name of Jesus. It's been said before that when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. Christian nationalists use Christianity to protect their own social, political, and economic power. But the teachings of Jesus are a threat to all power that is not shared. Christian nationalists like to say that our laws should be based on the Bible until they read the words of Jesus. Release the prisoners, welcome the stranger, liberate the oppressed, put away your sword, sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor. I know some Republican politicians who are pretty unhappy living in a Christian nation. Hey, I'm a progressive Democrat, and the teachings of Jesus unsettle me too.
I know Democrats that would be.
Jesus should unsettle all of us. Jesus challenges the powerful. Christian nationalists indoctrinate the powerless. Instead of posting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, why don't they post money is the root of all evil in every boardroom? Why don't they post do not judge in every courtroom? Why don't they post turn the other cheek in the halls of the Pentagon?
Okay. Yeah, of course this will be the most replayed. That's not shocking to me.
Read the cross. Christian nationalists use Christianity to protect their own social, political, and economic power. But the teachings of Jesus are a threat to all power that is not shared. Christian nationalists like to say that our laws should be based on the Bible until they read the words of Jesus. Release the prisoners, welcome the stranger, liberate the oppressed, put away your sword, sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor. I know some Republican politicians who are pretty unhappy living in a Christian nation. Hey, I'm a progressive Democrat, and the teachings of Jesus unsettle me too. Jesus should unsettle all of us. Jesus challenges the powerful. Christian nationalists indoctrinate the powerless. Instead of posting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, why don't they post money is the root of all evil in every boardroom?
Okay, well, scripture doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all evil, but okay, James.
Why don't they post do not judge in every courtroom?
Because the judge has the authority to judge in the courtroom. And the judge has the authority to, the courtroom's laws allow the jurors to have the authority to judge in a courtroom. That's why, James, but okay.
Why don't they post turn the other cheek in the halls of the Pentagon?
Lord have mercy.
Why don't they post?
Oh my goodness. He who has ears, let him hear.
It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven on the floor.
James is a sneaky one. You know that?
Or the New York Stock Exchange.
On the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It's harder for a rich man to enter heaven. Oh man. So that's what you want on the New York Stock Exchange, because you just assume that everyone that works on the New York Stock Exchange, right? Everyone who works on NYSE is going to hell. Or everyone who does, they're a rich man. So they should be warned that it's hard for them to get to heaven. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Okay, James. Okay, James. You're a sneaky one.
Because Christian nationalists are not interested in legislating Christian values. They are only interested in legislating Christian dominance. Christian nationalism is putting prayer.
See, they even gave him applause for that. This is what happens. I have to do a little bit more research on what church. He said this church. Okay, so I don't know what church James is at. At his home church. Okay, I don't know what churches they don't say what his home church is. St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Austin. Well, that makes sense why the gay flag is right here and the trans flag is right here. Okay. Okay, James. Okay, James.
That democracy is not the solution, but the problem. They're undermining our elections and stealing our freedoms. They're indoctrinating students and defunding schools. They're banning drugs and banning abortion.
Mind you, I didn't do that search because I feel like gay people and trans people aren't allowed in, like, they're not allowed in church. Like, obviously they should come to church. Please come to church. I'm just saying, like, we don't have to have the flag right there, though. So that was already kind of like a tall tale sign to me. I was like, I wonder what kind of church this is.
Some of them want to ban IVF, ban contraception, ban women from voting. Some of them want to ban gay marriage and interracial marriage, all in the name of Jesus. It's been said before that when fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. Christian nationalists use Christianity to protect their own social, political, and economic power. But the teachings of Jesus are a threat to all power that is not shared. Christian nationalists like to say that our laws should be based on the Bible until they read the words of Jesus. Release the prisoners, welcome the stranger, liberate the oppressed, put away your sword, sell all your possessions and give the money to the poor. I know some Republican politicians who are pretty unhappy living in a Christian nation. Hey, I'm a progressive Democrat, and the teachings of Jesus unsettle me too. Jesus should unsettle all of us. Jesus challenges the powerful. Christian nationalists indoctrinate the powerless. Instead of posting the 10 Commandments in every classroom, why don't they post money is the root of all evil in every boardroom? Why don't they post do not judge in every courtroom? Why don't they post turn the other cheek in the halls of the Pentagon? Why don't they post it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange? Because Christian nationalists are not interested in legislating Christian values. They are only interested in legislating Christian dominance. Christian nationalism is putting prayer in schools and taking free lunches out. Christian nationalism is teaching the Bible in schools, but refusing to give teachers a pay raise. Christian nationalism is forcing schools to post the 10 Commandments while nominating a candidate for president who has violated almost all of them. It is not about Jesus. It is about power. But Jesus wasn't interested in consolidating power. He was interested in sharing it. When he began his public ministry, he started by announcing the arrival of something he called the kingdom of God, a new world, a new creation, a covenantal community, an upside-down kingdom that would replace the kingdoms of the world. Jesus belonged to a tradition of Hebrew prophets.
Okay, so we're 15 minutes in. I'm going to hold that right there. This, I have to play on tomorrow's live stream. I have to. You know, part of the reason why I want us to see this, and I don't want you guys to get all extra religious on me, right? I'm not saying that James is the Antichrist or anything like that. That's just crazy. But I'm just saying, like, we should watch out for things like this, because a lot of the times, like, people who aren't very familiar with Scripture, they will exalt someone just talking about Scripture because Jesus is popular and he's attractive and he's God. So people tend to do things like that, right? Like one headline that I saw in the news for James was, I forgot, godly Democrat or God-fearing Democrat flees Texas to go to Chicago to avoid Trump or something like that. And I'm thinking to myself like, now that's interesting how they attributed God to him, right? Based on like some of the things they've said, like I'm guessing some of the sermons they've seen, but also in conjunction with him fleeing his state to do something that a lot of officials are saying is borderline illegal to avoid his ruler, right, which would be President Trump, which I know it's somewhere around Romans 13:14 that talks about us submitting ourselves to governing authorities, which James' governing authority would be his president. Yeah, so it's just interesting, like the play on words I'm seeing in the way that like they're putting this all together, and I'm thinking to myself like, the Lord has drawn my attention to Mr. Tellerico, and I think it's just interesting that, you know, we have one of the biggest podcasters in the world, Joe Rogan, say you should run for president. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with with what Joe Rogan said. I'm just saying as Christians we have to be discerning. So yeah, we'll be playing some of Mr. Tellerico stuff for some time. Let's see, you know, if he makes it to the Senate and how far he goes from there. But I'm going to play this again on the live stream tomorrow. So those of you that watch this back later, know that tomorrow this will this will also be on, and I'll probably play it all the way through, or I might pick back up where we're at now, which we're at minute marker 15:02. So that would only leave about a little less than 10 minutes left for the clip, so I might just do that tomorrow. All right, guys, so I'm gonna end the live stream here. I'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna pick up first live stream early in the day, second live stream later in the day. So with that being said, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, love yourselves, love one another, be peaceful. Peace.